China is on a military modernization mission. Over the past several decades, the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, has been developing itself into a serious threat. The US Department of Defense, or DoD, digs into the details. On the ground, Beijing is improving the technology and equipment it delivers to troops, as well as engaging in more joint training. It's developing missiles at an alarming rate, with its work in hypersonic missiles suggesting it's on the verge of creating a new frontier for war in that arena. At sea, China has developed the world's largest navy, with over 370 ships and submarines, in addition to launching its third aircraft carrier in 2023. The PLA's Air Force has more planes than ever, with Beijing also engaging in a buildup of unmanned aircraft and the development of the H-6N nuclear-capable bomber. The DoD sums it all up succinctly. China is rapidly catching up to Western air forces. It's easy to view China's modernization through a Western lens, leading to the assumption that Beijing is trying to compete with the likes of the US. But the reality is that China's current ambitions lie much closer to home. While attacking America may be a plan for the future, right now it's trying to establish its dominance in the Indo-Pacific, with one nation above all others standing in its way: Japan. Tokyo knows what China is doing, and it's not sitting around and waiting. Far from it. Japan has responded to China's military modernization by investing heavily in developing new weapons of its own. And it's the most powerful of those weapons that represent the greatest threat to China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. This weapon is a world first. It's a weapon that Japan has successfully tested, and it's one that they can deploy at sea to take out a range of targets. And perhaps most importantly, it may represent the world's biggest counter to China's hypersonic threat. With this weapon, Japan has shown China that it's far from the only nation in the Indo-Pacific that packs some heavy firepower. It's also shocked Beijing and the rest of the world by developing a weapon that even the United States has never been able to turn into a reality, despite decades of research. So what is this weapon? A fully functioning and tested railgun. On October 17, 2023, Japan's Acquisition, Technology and Logistics Agency, or ATLA, posted a message on X, formerly Twitter, stating, "ATLA has accomplished shipboarding firing test of a railgun for the first time in the world with the cooperation of the JMSDF." For context, the JMSDF is the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, with this X post being a clear message to China: we have a weapon that's capable of taking on your hypersonic missiles. That brings us to some questions. Why is having a railgun so important to Japan's defense policy? What advantages does this unique weapon deliver? And why is China so shocked by Japan's announcement? And what will all of this mean for the geopolitical power balance in the Indo-Pacific? This video will answer all of these questions, but we'll start with perhaps the most important. What is a railgun? According to Born to Engineer, functional railguns represent a technology that the world's militaries have been trying to master for more than a century. The concept was the brainchild of a French inventor named André-Louis Octave Fourchon-Villeplay, who developed his first prototype in 1917. That prototype caught the attention of France's Ministry of Armaments, which commissioned Fourchon-Villeplay to work on a 30 by 50mm electric cannon to help the country during World War I. Fourchon-Villeplay was never able to scale up his prototype into a functional weapon, with France abandoning the concept after World War I. But the idea had potential. Fourchon-Villeplay's railgun was an electrical weapon capable of propelling a projectile forward at incredibly high speeds using electromagnetic force. That separates it from traditional firearms such as guns, where those firearms require some sort of chemical combustion to generate the force required to fire a projectile. A railgun uses a combination of electricity and magnetism. According to the Executive Gov website, a working railgun will contain 3 key components. The first is a power supply capable of sending the millions of volts needed to trigger the weapon's electromagnetic capabilities. That alone has been an engineering challenge, as that power supply would ideally need to be portable to make the railgun usable for anything other than a cannon installed in a military base. The rails are the second component. These are made using extremely conductive material, typically large magnets, through which the electricity generated by the power supply runs. There are 2 of these rails, one with a positive charge and the other with a negative charge, that work in tandem to propel the weapon's projectile forward. Finally, there's the armature, which is something of a bridge between the 2 rails. Not only is the armature responsible for carrying electricity to the rails, but it's also where the projectile that the railgun fires is stored. So how do these components work in tandem? Once the user kickstarts the railgun's power supply, it sends a powerful electric current to the weapon's positive rail. That current is then transmitted through the armature into the negative rail. With the two rails essentially linked by the current, an electromagnetic field is created that's so strong it can launch a projectile up to 7 times as fast as the speed of light, or 5,320 miles per hour. For context, the hypersonic missile Japan is developing its railgun to counter are capable of traveling at around 5 times the speed of sound, making a railgun's projectile so fast that it can catch up to practically anything today's militaries have available. But there are problems with railguns, with those problems being the reason why a functional version of the weapon beyond Fauchon Villaplay's prototype has never been built before. One of these problems, according to Born to Engineer, is creating a railgun that's durable enough to fire several shots using the same set of rails. The sheer force of the projectile, coupled with the wear that transmitting millions of volts of electricity through the rails creates, destroys the rails quickly. As the website notes, any functional railgun would need to be capable of firing around 6 rounds per minute and have a lifespan that enables it to fire 3,000 rounds in total. Assuming those durability issues are solved, there's also the issue of guidance. After all, a projectile designed to take out fast-moving targets means little if the weapon can't aim at those targets. Any guidance system built into a railgun would need to be capable of withstanding extremely powerful electromagnetic fields, as well as temperatures of up to 1,472 degrees Fahrenheit. There's also the issue of plasma formation at the railgun's muzzle exit to consider, as well as the radiation the weapon produces, both of which could damage a guidance system. Neither are problems that the United States has been able to solve despite working on the concept of railguns for decades. And with all of these challenges in mind, you might ask another question. Why bother trying to create a railgun at all? On the warfare front, having a railgun would give a nation access to the fastest projectile yet developed. A navy could equip a ship with one to essentially give itself a traveling defense system capable of shooting practically any missile that currently exists out of the sky, as well as the hypersonic missiles that China currently has in development. Remember that point as it will be important later on. Of course, a land-based railgun would have similar functions, perhaps allowing a military to guard its most valuable bases from high-speed airborne threats. Looking beyond military applications, railguns could potentially be used to intercept celestial bodies before they land on Earth. Executive Gov notes that the high-speed projectile a railgun fires could be so powerful that it could knock an asteroid off course. And the spacefaring potential of this weapon doesn't end there. The massive amounts of kinetic energy railguns produce could be harnessed to fire rockets and satellites into space, assuming the technology could be scaled up to that level. Finally, throw in the cost benefits. Though developing a railgun would be an expensive operation, the US Navy invested around $500 million into the technology over 15 years to make it happen. The cost of using it will be relatively small. Estimates vary, though an archived article in National Defense magazine published in 2001 placed the potential cost of a railgun projectile as low as $25,000. While that may seem like a lot of money, it's nothing compared to the cost of the missile interceptors that the US has available right now. The Standard Missile 6, or SM-6, for instance, costs around $3.9 million per projectile. That's considered the standard bearer for the US Navy's sea-based ballistic missile defense. A working railgun will be able to rattle off 156 projectiles for each SM-6 if the $25,000 per round estimate is accurate. Those benefits justify the millions of dollars that have already been poured into railgun research and development. Still, the problem has never been solved. Though all of the theory was there, and it was possible to create working prototypes, scaling railguns up to the point where they had practical uses for the military seemed to be an impossibility. Until now. That brings us back to Japan's 2023 tests. This test didn't come out of the blue. Popular Science reports that Japan has been planning to develop a railgun since at least 2015, with its goal being what it ultimately ended up achieving with the 2023 tests: build a ship-mounted railgun that would essentially be a portable missile deterrent. In 2016, the country successfully ran a railgun test that saw it propel a projectile to a staggering 4,470 miles per hour, which is almost 6 times the speed of sound. Japan also made its intentions clear in its 2022 military budget proposal. Railguns were mentioned by name, with a spokesperson for ATLA speaking to Naval News in the wake of the 2023 test. They said, starting in fiscal year 2022, we have been conducting research aimed at establishing the overall technology necessary for early practical realization of railguns, including rapid fire performance and stability during flight, which are important for the practical application of railguns. There were other hints this test was coming. For instance, the JMSDF signed a contract worth around $72,000 with an unspecified company to deliver the equipment needed to mount a 40mm railgun onto a vessel. That contractor is believed to be Japan Steelworks Limited, which Naval News mentioned is already known to be involved in Japan's railgun project. After all, that contract came on the back of one signed in May 2022 between the ATLA and Japan's Steelworks, which granted the company $47.9 million to work on a railgun prototype. Add another multi-million-dollar contract for developing a power supply along with capacitors that were small enough to use with the gun, and it's clear that the ATLA and Japan's Steelworks have been in bed together for a long time. Then came the test itself. Japan shared the footage on X, which appeared to show a railgun mounted on the JS Asuka, which is an experimental ship the country uses to test out new technologies. However, details beyond that are unknown. The JMSDF and ATLA are keeping many of the key details confidential, with neither revealing the new railgun's muzzle velocity or projectile rate. However, we have data from older tests. The previously mentioned 2016 test saw Japan fire a projectile at Mach 5.8, with the later 2018 test apparently hitting Mach 6.5. It's reasonable to assume that the 2023 test saw Japan fire a projectile at an even higher speed, perhaps reaching Mach 7. But there's even more to the 2023 test than meets the eye. Not only has the ATLA been working with Japan's Steelworks and the JMSDF to get its railgun up and running, it has another vital partner, one that will have China running scared, the United States. In December 2023, just 2 months after Japan showcased its railgun, China claimed to have built one that could fire several projectiles without sustaining damage to its rails. How true those claims are remain to be seen, and they may have just been a response to Japan designed to minimize the country's achievement. After all, China not only knows that Japan's railgun means it's ahead in the technology race, but it also knows that Japan has been working with the US to make the railgun possible. After all, the US got very close to solving the puzzle in the 2010s. Next Big Future reports that the US spent 4 years, starting in 2011, firing off around 1,000 test shells using its own railgun prototype. By 2018, they were trying to build a single railgun that could fire at least 1,000 rounds before having to be replaced. However, it never quite managed to achieve that goal, possibly because of a combination of budgetary and technological factors, leading to the US putting its research on pause in 2021. China likely thought that pause would give it time to catch up, but it probably didn't anticipate that the US would start working with Japan. That cooperation was practically confirmed in May 2024, when the Japan Times reported that Japan had sent one of its defense officials to the US to discuss railgun technology. Tokyo's goal was simple: leverage America's own research into the weapon to improve the versions it was building itself. A similar dispatch occurred in November 2023, a month after Japan's successful test, and Japan had likely been sending officials to the US for several years before this. After all, Japan and the United States are part of the Trilateral Pact, which also includes South Korea, that's designed to allow these 3 nations to cooperate on matters of defense. Working together to build a railgun could fall under the Pact's remit. All of this brings us to another question. Why has Japan focused so much effort on building a weapon that even the United States appear to have given up on? The answer lies in China. Disregarding China's claims that it also mastered railgun technology, given that Beijing offered no proof and made those claims mere months after Japan demonstrated its weapon, there's also another reason that China is such a threat to Japan: its hypersonic missiles, or at least the hypersonic missiles Beijing claims to have in development. According to the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance, or MDAA, the Dongfeng 27 or DF-27 missile is believed to have entered service in 2021. That's when it was first mentioned in the DoD's annual China Military Power Report, which claimed that the missile was in development. Since then, official documents released by the PLA have claimed that not only will the DF-27 be equipped with a hypersonic warhead of some description, but that it's capable of traveling between 3,106 and 4,970 miles. That's enough to hit several states in the US, with Hawaii being the most likely target, as well as certainly being enough for China to target Japan with its new weapon. There's more. The MDAA also claims to have access to a leaked document that details a successful test of the DF-27 conducted on February 25, 2023. Apparently, the missile flew for 12 minutes, traveling 1,304 miles. The same leaked document revealed that the DF-27 was mounted with a hypersonic glide vehicle, which is likely what will be used to deliver the missile's payload. Finally, the document also noted that variants of the DF-27 have been deployed in limited numbers that could strike both land and naval targets. That missile is a worrying proposition for Japan. Though it's unclear if the DF-27 itself can reach hypersonic speeds, it's clear that the glide vehicle mounted on the missile can. Either way, both represent clear threats to Japan based on the missile's range and speed, neither of which it or the US could counter with its own missiles. China has even noted in a May 2023 research journal that its new hypersonic missiles could take out an American aircraft carrier with certainty. Of course, that's worrying to the United States, but given that Japan works so closely with the US, relying on it to help maintain balance in the Indo-Pacific region, any threat to American naval power essentially becomes a threat to Japan. So the need for Japan's railgun becomes apparent. The weapon is a clear counter to the threat that China poses with the DF-27. It also couldn't have come at a better time. Though China has made several claims about its hypersonic missiles, we only have a limited number of known tests on which to base analysis. Is the DF-27 truly as capable as Beijing claims? Is it still in the testing phase? The answers aren't clear yet, with Japan's showcasing its railgun tests perhaps having a secondary goal of teasing more information out of China so it and the US can get a better handle on the true threat the DF-27 poses. But that's speculative. Less speculative is what the railgun tests represent for Japan, a move away from pacifism that's defined the nation's military strategy since the end of World War II. Japan made that move official in December 2022, when it revealed plans to conduct its largest military buildup in nearly 80 years. Those plans included setting out a $320 billion budget, which it claims will be enough to buy the missiles it'll need to strike China should tensions in the Indo-Pacific rise to the point where war occurs. Laid out over 5 years, the plan would ultimately make Japan the third highest military spender behind the US and China, showcasing a clear move toward militarizing a country that many consider to be a sleeping giant. Even the country's Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, was bullish in his description of the move, calling it a turning point in history, while noting that the massive increase in military budget was "my answer to the various security challenges that we face." In other words, Japan has seen China modernize rapidly, and it knows it has to play catch-up to maintain its influence in the Indo-Pacific. This is an interesting move not only because of the potential ramifications it has for Japan's relationship with China, but also because of the country's relationship with the US. After all, as Reuters reports, Japan essentially gave up its right to wage war against another country per a constitutional agreement with the US in the wake of World War II. A military buildup seems to counter that agreement, though it's clear that America's close defensive ties with Japan are one of the key reasons it's happening. The two countries have a far better relationship than they did in the aftermath of World War II, and even if they didn't, the US might see a Japanese military build as advantageous given the moves China has made over the past 2 decades. Regardless, it's clear that Japan's railgun tests represent yet another step toward a military modernization that's designed to counteract Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. What does Japan's railgun mean for China? The simple answer is that it's not good news for Beijing. Japan and China have had a long-standing military rivalry, one that's seen Japan come out on top more often than not. You could even argue that China's military modernization, on the cultural level, is at least partly influenced by the Century of Humiliation. Occurring between 1839 and 1949, that period saw China lose control of huge portions of its territory to overseas powers, with the US-China Economic and Security Review Commission, or USCC, noting that the Century of Humiliation has been a key part of modern China's founding narrative. The country is meant to be resurgent, rising above the humiliations of the past to take its rightful place as a key world power. Japan played a key role in those humiliations. As the USCC notes, China has historically seen Japan as something of a little brother prior to the Century of Humiliation. That changed in the 1890s when Japan's military became so strong that it could defeat China. The following years saw Japan take numerous pieces of Chinese territory, including Taiwan and parts of Manchuria, before encroaching into mainland China in the worlds leading up to World War II. For China, the march toward militarization was, at least partly, designed to place it ahead of Japan once again. Now, with its railgun and heavy investment into its military, Japan is threatening to reach parity with China. You could even argue that it may become more powerful by virtue of its relationship with the US. None of this is good news for China in terms of its influence in the Indo-Pacific or its cultural desire to relegate Japan to the status of little brother once again. On a more practical level, Japan's railgun also places it in a position to counter the hypersonic missiles China believed would make it a greater threat in the Indo-Pacific. Granted, the 2023 railgun test still showed a prototype. It's unknown how close Japan is to developing a full guidance system for its railgun's projectiles, or whether it solved the durability issues that caused the US to abandon the weapon. But by the same token, there's also much we don't know about the DF-27 and its true capabilities. All China will see is a weapon capable of shooting a hypersonic missile out of the sky. That alone may be enough to reduce China's threat level in the Indo-Pacific, with its influence in the region perhaps decreasing in the process. Finally, there are the ramifications of America's cooperation with Japan on the development of its railgun. To China, that may be the greatest threat of all. Beijing already has to deal with Japan being allied to the US as part of a trilateral defense agreement. Now it can do little more than watch as Japan's engineers build on an already impressive railgun demonstration, all with information gleaned from a country that spent around 15 years trying to build a version of the weapon themselves. Even with China's claims that it's already mastered railgun technology, which are likely untrue, seeing two nations work together on such an important weapon can only spell bad news for Beijing. It's another sign that any attack on Japan in the future could end up being an attack on the United States. And even with its military modernization, that's a war China isn't likely to win. Ultimately, Japan's 2023 railgun tests shocked China, not just because Japan has a functional railgun. It was also a shock that said railgun emerged so soon after it announced its DF-27, with the aftershock of US cooperation also clearly causing issues for Beijing. But what do you think? Is Japan's railgun test as impressive as it appears at first glance, or will Tokyo eventually stall out as it tries to solve the issues that America's engineers couldn't overcome in the past? How do you think this test, and Japan's heavier investment in its military, could affect the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific? Let us know in the comments section, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out Japan Shocks China by Revealing 5 Never-Before-Seen Weapons, or click this other video instead.